Alright, so we'd like to welcome Maharaj here today. Thanks for doing this, Kadamba Kanana Maharaj. So a little bit of history on Maharaj, if I can do a little bit of a biography of you. Originally Maharaj was born in Holland, in the Netherlands. He joined ISKCON in 1978 in Amsterdam. Didn't join in Amsterdam.
No.
This is, wow.
Vrindavan.
In Vrindavan?
Yes.
There we go. So you can see I've really researched this and I've got good facts here. From 1985 to 1990, Maharaj was in charge of the construction of Srila Prabhupada's Samadhi, which was a huge job.
In Mayapur.
In Mayapur.
Yes.
In the Pushpa Samadhi. So, and then in 1990 to 95, Maharaj was the temple president of Vrindavan Krishna Balaram temple. And in 1995, unfortunately, there was a murder attempt on Maharaj, which was quite controversial at the time. Maharaj then took sannyas from his guru, Jayadvaita Swami, and Kadamba Kanana Maharaj is one of the first few Diksha gurus within ISKCON that were not initiated by Srila Prabhupada. Maharaj is also a member of the Vrindavan Executive Board, GBC for the ISKCON Vrindavan, and has spent the 80s, some period of time in the 80s, back here in Melbourne, where we got to know, some of us here, the older devotees, got to know Maharaj very, very closely, and we've established a good friendship for many, many years. And even at that time, Maharaj was an exceptional devotee. So here come the questions. So Maharaj, what fond memories do you have of the early days here in Melbourne?
Early days here in Melbourne, huh? Well, I remember I was in India, and Bhaktivedanta decided, he was the authority, he decided that I should go to America, to Detroit. And in the afternoon it had changed into Australia. And that was it, you know. So I was going to Australia, and how I had to ring up the temple president and ask him to pay the ticket. It was really hard to get him on the line. And finally I had him on the line, and then he said, "It's a bad line, I can't understand." And bang, put the horn down. I was like, ah. It started good, anyway, but then he sent the money for the ticket, and he sent plenty. So, you know, I had quite some money left after the tickets. Came here to Melbourne. We met him in the office upstairs, there was Balaram, and he says, he said, "You had a good trip, this, that." He said, "Yes, yes, yes." I said, "I have some money left from the tickets, I wanted to give it." He said, No, you keep it. You buy some clothes for your wife and for yourself." I was a grihasta at the time. And he said, "Go to Myers, you know, and go buy something." Expensive place, as you all know, right? We go to Myers, we think, wow, he's really generous. We're buying all the clothes. Next morning he calls me in the office again and says, "How are you going to pay your debt?"
That's typical Bella, right?
Why didn't you tell me yesterday, you know, I wouldn't have bought all the clothes, right?
Okay.
It took off from there, you know.
Yeah. How long were you here in Melbourne exactly?
Not so long. I was here to pay off the debt, right? And then what happened was that the Sankirtan leader was our Atmaram, who's now in Otford. And he was a stormtrooper, to say the least, right? He was very... And since I was collecting to pay off a debt, he decided that he would give me a special area. So one morning, Gyana Samudra picked me up, dropped me off in the van, in a factory area, and I had to sell paintings. Okay. I was walking in the street, and I saw this sign, "Blood and Bones, $20. And I was thinking, what in the world is this? You know, I just came fresh from Vrindavan a few days. I'm walking in the street, blood and bones. Because whose blood, whose bones? And then, right, it turned out that they were all slaughterhouses. Leverton. The best part of Melbourne. I got Leverton. And I walked into this place, and there were chickens everywhere, and they were being slaughtered, and I was selling paintings while the man was in action. Anyway, he bought $400 worth, and I wasn't sure if I would take the money or not. And then as I walked out, there was a chicken on the wrong side of the fence. And I told that chicken, run, chicken, run. He didn't take it. I tell you. So I had some good memories of Melbourne.
So Maharaj, everybody wants to know how you came to ISKCON. What attracted you to come to ISKCON in the first time, to become a Hare Krishna devotee?
Yeah. Well, I come from a Dutch business family, and they had some families, some businesses in the family, plus some family members were executives in big companies. So I grew up 20 kilometers outside of Amsterdam in sort of a director's town, which and everyone worked in Amsterdam but lived there in kind of a nice place. So it was a very sheltered environment, and my father was planning that I would be his successor. But there was one problem. My father was not a happy man, to say the least. He was highly stressed, he was highly depressed, he was outright miserable, and if I had to be his successor, I had serious doubts about it. So at one point I decided, nah, this is not for me. So when I was 17, then I decided, this is it. I'm not going to go this route. So I told my father the happy news that I was going to leave, and that I was going to go and travel and eventually go to India. So, well, he exploded. That's what fathers do when you act like that. And he basically, he screamed and he said, if you don't do what I say, I won't give you a cent. And then I said, that's all right. I don't need your money. I can make enough to get by myself, and I don't need so much, so I'll be okay. And then his anger changed into fear, because he had no grip on me. He could really see that he had totally no grip on me. Couldn't do anything. So then it was fixed. I was leaving, and I wrote a song on my guitar. Going away is a part of my life, the life I got to live. And my mother slipped me some money on the side, as mothers do. And off I went on a journey to India. It took me slowly via Yugoslavia, Greece, and Turkey. It was all overland, so it was a gradual journey. In India, I had many different adventures, but which would be too long to describe. But one thing was, I came to the Ganges, and there I just studied all the activities that were going on around the Ganges. The pujas, the people bathing, the people coming late at night and putting like flower boats with a little light into the river, the people that would float by in wooden boats and sing religious songs, the temples and all the worship, and I really liked it. I just really liked that spiritual atmosphere. And there was this one temple where constantly the mantra Siridam Jairam Jai Jai Ram, Siridam Jairam Jai Jai Ram was playing. So I picked up the mantra there. And I've chanted that mantra for quite a number of years before I came to the Hare Krishna movement. Yeah.
But what was the actual point where you made contact with the devotees and said, this is how I want to spend the rest of my life?
Well, I mean, little by little, India prepared me. I became more and more aware of Indian philosophy, and I went back to the Netherlands, and there was a friend of mine who was unusual because he was very into nature. He worked in the forest and just in gardening. He would mostly sleep outside, which in the Netherlands is quite tough. And he would pick herbs from the forest, grow some vegetables in the garden, and he would cook for us every day. Serve us, wash the dishes, and just really like a servant. And that person, from one day to the next, disappeared into a Hare Krishna temple. So then, okay, I went to visit him. So that was the first time I went to a Sunday feast, really. Really to see my old friend. And of course, the devotees all started preaching to me, and okay, I was like, not too fast, ho, ho, ho. I was not one to just jump in. But I read books, I studied it carefully, and so by the time that I kind of came to the point and said, okay, I'll do this, I had been exposed quite extensively. I'd read the books for a number of years. I had spent time in India. So, you know, in those days we say joined in 78 because I moved into the temple in 78. But actually, it's more like I started to become a regular member of the congregation in 76. Right. And for 2 years I was sort of part of the temple, coming from time to time, reading, and so on. And always on the way to India again. So then what was the point where I moved in? The point where this friend, he told me, next time you go to India, you must go to Vrindavan. So I did that. Came to Mathura, arrived there, someone said, I asked someone, is it far? He said, no, not far. Can I walk? Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so it's 20 kilometers, so for us Westerners it's quite a walk. I walked the whole distance and I reached in the evening, and there were no people on the road, only cows. It was like maybe 100 cows walking towards Vrindavan, and I went to Vrindavan. I arrived in Vrindavan together with the cows. So it was a special experience. It sort of came, and it was just time for the evening arti in the Krishna Bhagavan temple. Wow. I came there. So it just came the evening arti, the deities and everything. It was overwhelming. So then I decided, okay, this is not an ordinary place. This is definitely this place is spiritual. I could understand. Mm. And then I stayed in the temple and stayed there for some time, but I couldn't stay that long because my visa was running out for India and things like that. So eventually I had to go back. But on the way I got jaundice, heavy jaundice, and that's a story in itself.
You said that you started to make contact with the devotees in 76, so did you ever get a chance to actually meet Srila Prabhupada?
No. Of course, chance, yes, but Prabhupada at that time didn't come to anywhere nearby, and at least not when I was there. I was always on the way to India. I could have gone and tried to meet him in India, but at that time I was not ready to make that kind of a commitment.
Fair enough. You're talking about how you enjoy music, and you were saying like when you left your father you started playing on a guitar and started singing and I'm leaving, da, 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 da. Has music been an important part of your life? And if so, have you had any professional training at all as far as music is concerned?
Okay. Well, I've been playing music from very early age, because my father was a musician.
All right.
Yeah. He had made the choice to go into business, you know, but during the Second World War, as a student, he was playing in bands and so on. So he was quite a good musician in many ways. But okay, he got more serious about business. So he taught the kids to play musical instruments. So when we were kids, we were already playing. I was playing a mandolin and like that. We were playing. Had a little home band with my sister.
Do you have any contact with your family still?
A little bit. I didn't have for a long time because my parents expired a long time ago.
Okay.
And then, you know, after that, my family also was all over the world. My sister was married to a Navy officer, and every few years they're transferred and moved to some corner of the world. But I lost track of her because they was always moving, and I was always moving. But then a few years ago, somewhere I saw her name in a phone book on the internet, and then I noticed that she lived very close to Radedesh in Belgium.
Really?
So then, 45 minutes away. So then I went there once. I was in Radedesh, so I went for a visit one time. So nowadays I'm sometimes meeting my sister. My brother I haven't seen for a long time. He's not so interested in Krishna consciousness, so we grew up.
Speaking of your early childhood and your family, did you have spiritual aspirations when you were younger? Were you brought up in a Christian or religious sort of family at all? Or?
No. I have somehow or other very little to do with Christianity. I never had affiliation with Christianity at all.
That's amazing.
Zero.
Yeah.
The only Christian influence I have in my life comes from the fact that other people in the country were Christian. But I went to the church only twice in my life.
Really?
Once to a Catholic one and once to a Protestant one. Yeah. That was it. Never went to the church. Didn't feel at home also in the church. I thought it was too dark for me.
But did you have spiritual feelings yourself when you were younger? Did you contemplate God or what
the truth?
Was all about? Yeah.
The truth. I was interested in the truth. See, my parents were very liberal. They were open and they didn't want to impose anything on their children. For example, we could, when other children or other young people, their parents would always tell them what time to come home, you know. But my parents never told me what time to come home. I could come home any time I liked. But of course, they knew all my friends had to come home at 10 o'clock, so I also came home at 10 o'clock. But with religion, you know, when I was about 6, I remember that my father told me, he said, we don't want to impose any religion upon you, and therefore we leave the choice up to you.
At 6 years old?
Yeah, and I thought like, but how am I going to figure it out? So in this way, religion was something I thought, well, put it on the shelf, you know, I'll deal with it later.
Yeah, fair enough. So then you became a devotee. You became an important devotee very quickly in that you took on responsibilities, and one of those responsibilities was that you were a temple president of Vrindavan, Krishna Balaram Mandir in Vrindavan. I just want to go back to this moment in your life because it's so exceptional in that it doesn't happen to the everyday run-of-the-mill devotee where there's a murder, a threat of an attack upon you. How did you cope with that? And what are the ramifications of that attack to this day? Do you still feel threatened, or do you feel, you know, some feeling towards that at all? Anyway,
first of all, when I became president in Vrindavan, there was a difficult situation. Vrindavan is a place which is the spiritual world, it's transcendental, but then on top of that transcendental place, there is another place, the world of Yogamaya, an illusory Indian village that is like a covering that hides the spiritual Vrindavan.
Right.
Yeah. in this day and age, Vrindavan, on the level of the covering, is in Uttar Pradesh, which is a bit of a lawless state in India, and in the district life is like that. There's not much law and order. Yeah? So it's always been like that, and so there is a bit of a mafia in Vrindavan. Ordinary people don't deal with such people, but when you're a president of a big institution, you may get some interaction. And I was buying some land for the temple,
right.
And in the process, I once stepped on the toes of some mafia people, because they had come to me and wanted some. They wanted to sell some land, and I bought it directly from the owner and not from them, and saved $60,000.
Right.
Not Australian dollars, by the way, American. So it was a lot of money. Yeah. So possibly that could have been one motive why something happened to me. There could be other reasons, maybe a disgruntled devotee. There's always a disgruntled devotee in a big temple. Anyway, one night I went to the bathroom, and suddenly, as I was in the bathroom, bang, from above, over the wall, and then I got hit by a bullet, and I felt that in slow motion go through me, and I fell on the ground, and instinctively I realized not to go unconscious. So I stayed. I knew if I go unconscious here, I'll bleed to death and they'll find me tomorrow.
Right. Yeah.
So I managed to do some pranayama, and I dealt with the pains, and I stayed conscious. Then I pulled myself up on the door handle, and I saw that here on the right side there was like a ball hanging like as big as a football. And well, in there was blood and bits of flesh and so on, bits of stomach and bits of liver and bits of that. So it didn't look good, and I thought to myself, I may not survive this. But I thought, somehow or other I should get out of this bathroom so that people can find me. Yeah. So I did that. And but it was very painful. So I fell on my knees on the veranda in great pain. And the first person who came was South American. And when he asked me what happened, I whispered, and it said, "Shut." And he heard, "Shock? You got an electric shock?" And I could hardly speak. And then he told everyone that I had an electric shock. And I was sitting there, and I couldn't speak. So I couldn't tell anybody. I got shot, and I'm bleeding to death. Take me to a hospital, but I couldn't speak, so I couldn't say it. So I was just sitting there, and I was thinking, all these people around me, looking at me, and they were looking what to do. And I was the one who usually told everyone what to do. And now there was no one to tell them what to do. And they're totally confused. And nobody was making arrangements for me to go to a hospital or anything. I was just sitting there. And I thought, I may really die, right? I'd better start thinking about Krishna. So I was thinking about Krishna, and I prayed to Krishna as good as I could. I was very dizzy. So it was difficult to chant the full Mahamantra. I was so dizzy that I just said, Krishna, 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 Krishna. And then I prayed to Krishna. I said, okay, maybe I can take birth in the Gurukul. I said, I'll take the risk sometimes. And come back in Vrindavan. Well, okay, the immediate experience, there are some more details, but they're not for here and now.
Do you still have physical repercussions from those injuries?
Well, if you take a shoe and you shoot a bullet through it, it's not going to be a new shoe, So if you shoot a hole through the body from the back to the front, you're going to have some problems, but that's all right. I think that I was in the hospital, And and the police came, and the DIG, you know, that's a big policeman in India, personally came. Big district head, you know, like of the Aga district, 2 million people. He comes and he says, well, we've investigated the case. He said, you know, we really have no evidence, there's nothing we can do. He said, but I can give you this. And he pulls out his gun and puts it on my bed. And he said, I can give you this, which means you take care of it. Local style. So I said, no, that's okay. You keep that one. He said, yeah, it looks better for a sadhu, maybe, not to get into it. I said, thank you so much. So, you know, I had to really think in that hospital, and I had to think like, well, I was thinking of Dharma, the bull Dharma. Yeah. When Dharma's legs were broken by Kali, Kali was standing there next to the bull with a stick in his hands, and Maharaj Pariksit arrives on the spot and says, who did this? And the bull says, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. It could be karma, it could be the will of providence. So I also was thinking, yeah, I can look at the cause, and the ultimate cause is Krishna. Right? Somehow or other Krishna sent me this. I'm trying to be a devotee, and Krishna sent me this for my purification, for my growth, and I will have to take it like that. I'll have to take this as Krishna's mercy, and that I have to learn from this. So that is really the more interesting part of the whole story. Like, what was there to learn in this shot? And in one shot, you know, sometimes I thought I should write a little book. In that book, I will not write so much about how the conspiracy came about, or who did it, or who didn't do it, who were the suspects, and so there were several. But I will write more about the internal meaning, you know, what lesson did I learn from it, right? It would be called In One Shot, because in one shot, I don't know if I'll ever write it, but because I'm not such a writer, but in one shot, many lessons were there. First of all, I was on the waiting list for sannyas. I was preparing for sannyas when this thing happened. And you know, in the Vedic literature, it says sannyas means you're socially dead. Well, that's exactly what happened to me. Because, you know, in India, when something happens to a person, then the police comes and they do a jimba, they do a sealing of the room. Yeah, they seal everything and no one's allowed in. And meanwhile, they go in there and steal everything they can from that room, yeah, because they're the only ones allowed in. And then by the time, you know, 3 months later they open it up and the room is empty, right? Everybody knows this, right? I also knew this, and the devotees also knew this. And there were 2 places, one my room, and the other one was the office downstairs, and there were all valuable things, and there were safes in both places, you know, since I was the president of a large institution. So the devotees were very worried. So what they did is they emptied out everything from my room and from the office, and then it went all over the place. And then everything disappeared. So I went to the bathroom, and I never came back in my old identity. And everything I had disappeared, and it was virtually like my identity died.
And at that stage you left as being temple president as well? I
had to. Right. I was a wreck. I was like finished. I mean, it took me 1.5 years before I could, you know, have a conversation like this. Yeah, sit in a chair for a long time.
Spiritually, do you think that gave you an impetus to be more serious about spiritual life? I know you were serious already, but do you think it gave you an even bigger boost?
There was no other option than to take shelter of Krishna. That was the first thing. The other thing is that I deeply had to think about what is it in me that brought these people to do this. It wasn't just mafia. there were some devotees from the inside as well involved in the whole thing.
Really?
Mm. Of course, not like a very high caliber, maybe a corrupt type, you know, because in these big projects there is always some people who come for the money. That also happens in India. But, so I had to deeply think, what was it that brought this out?
Mm.
And, well, you know, Dutch people are...
resilient.
Is the word resilient?
Stubborn?
That's one quality. He's Dutch, by the way.
So is he.
Just that you know. And Dutch people, no, they're not just that. They're that. They're strong-natured. They are very determined. It's a small country that had a very dynamic role in the world. Right? I mean, such a small country, they were everywhere, you know, doing all kinds of things, because the people are very, like they were in Mauritius first, they were in so many places, right? Very dynamic people. So the culture is like that, dynamic, enterprising, and yeah, it's sort of, things are a little clear-cut, you know. It's yes or no, and nothing in between, you know. And in India, well, that doesn't work so well, see. In India, it's never yes or no, you know. Yes can mean no, and no can mean yes, and it's all like, you know, it's more fluid, you know. If you mean. So there was a cultural issue going on.
Right.
And I could see I am too rigid, actually, in my yes and no, in my opinions, and I thought before Krishna consciousness that, which is also very Dutch, whatever is reasonable. And reasonable, you know, a Dutch thing is we must be reasonable. And if a group of people, you know, logically thinks that this is right, then you're right. And then the other party is wrong, finished, reasonable. No more discussion, finished, you're wrong, no discussion. But of course, people don't always like that. So I changed. I learned from that even if we are in disagreement, we shouldn't leave the other side dissatisfied. We should never leave just people dissatisfied. We should somehow or other come a little bit their way. We should work it out. We should meet somewhere on common ground. We should keep that. We cannot separate just in disagreement. Of course, some cultures have that mood. Like Spanish culture more has that mood. You know, we should work it out. But the Dutch culture, no, yes or no, you know, right or wrong, you know.
So there were some major changes in the world.
So I made some changes. I made some serious changes.
Now those changes, with those changes, you then took on responsibilities to go preach around the world, many, many places.
Yeah, I think that change was good for what I'm doing now, because I became much more sensitive to people, and I was more ready to adjust to people's needs and so on. And now I have to deal with so many people all over the world, from all kinds of cultures. I have to get on with all kinds of people that don't necessarily get on with each other.
I was going to mention that because one of the areas that you're preaching in now and doing a lot of work for Srila Prabhupada is in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like you to comment a little bit how you see ISKCON developing in South Africa, where there is this conflict between, still with apartheid being just recently disbanded, and there's still that conflict between the white, the Indian, and the black nation. And I was wondering how you deal with that and how you push Krishna consciousness on in that area of South Africa.
First of all, Krishna consciousness in South Africa is gigantic. Right? Melbourne is nice. I mean, it has a nice congregation, but you can't compare it to Durban. Right? I mean, this is like a nice provincial club. I mean, compared to Durban, which is like a very large project. There are two huge temples, right. Indian temples, two very big temples. There are about 50 Namahata groups, or whatever you want to call them, in the area. And then there is a large congregation that is not at all part of the Namahata, but that comes to the program. If we have a big program, a big weekend, we can get 5,000 people. Just give an example.
On a regular program?
Well, it's a big program, but that would be a big program, but that's possible. For Ratha-yatra, which is a 4-day festival, we get about 500,000 people, plus the congregation will sponsor and cook prasadam for 250,000 people, full plates, and we'll give that out, 250,000 people. So you're looking at like one of the most powerful yatras in our movement. It's like outside of India, I think you can look at England as a powerful yatra. You can, of course, America has a lot of facility, but LA is a very big temple. But Durban is like in the top 10 in the world in terms of big, major developments. So South Africa is a major yatra.
We were talking before about the black population in South Africa being the majority, and you were saying how you were developing different programs to encourage the more indigenous African people to take part in Krishna consciousness. Can you speak a little bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, I can say what led up to it and then I can explain. In 95, after that injury and so on, India was too hot. It was as soon as the hot season started, I was too weak, I was going to die. So I got to get out of the heat, I can't handle the heat. I went to Europe and it was freezing. It was just too cold. I made it through the summer, but as soon as autumn came, it was just too cold. And I was like getting severe colds and, and it looked like pneumonia. So it looked like, because I was very weak, so I had to get out of Europe. So then South Africa seemed to be a good place in between. And after all, they did the first heart transplant there in South Africa. Right. So they have very advanced medical facility, and we have so many devotees who are doctors in Durban. So it looked like, plus they have good Ayurveda there. Really? So it looked all like the right place for recovery. So I went to Durban, stayed there, and the Indian devotees took care of me very nicely. But yeah, as I was in Africa, I was also thinking, okay, Prabhupada wanted that we did something for the local people. So gradually this feeling in me started to develop from, I can't just spend all my time here with the Indian devotees who are very nice, but I have to do something for the local people. And I was a good fit for South Africa, and I'll tell you why. Because in South Africa, I was more Indian than the Indians there. Because I spent so many years in India, और मेरे को तो हिंदी आता है, और इनको तो कोई हिंदी नहीं आता है, वो लोग तो कुछ नहीं जानते, तो सब भूल गए। इसलिए तो, So in that way, I was more Indian than the Indians in South Africa. So they naturally accepted me as an authority. That was easy. And the same thing, there's a lot of people from Dutch background, and I was more Dutch than them. So that was easy also, They were thinking about our roots, and I knew everything about their roots, right? So that was easy. And then the Africans, they like rocking kirtans, right? And that's a language that I also speak. So in this way, I could easily relate to all the different populations. The Africans, naturally, we understood each other in kirtan. It needed no language. And the other communities I could connect with in other ways. So I fitted well in that country. And the African people have a very deep spiritual tradition. And if you really look at traditional African culture, not more modern urban culture, but traditional African culture, it's in many ways close to Vedic culture, to traditional Indian village life. Many things are there. They may sacrifice a cow sometimes, which would not be an Indian thing, but it's not something they would do on a regular basis. That would be something rarely done on very special occasions, because your cows is your wealth, right? So they are looking after their cows. It's not like here, you know, in
Leverton.
In Leverton, yeah, exactly. So in many ways there's similarities, and they actually had a pious tradition. Like, for example, the married ladies, they would be dressed and cover themselves. The young unmarried girls not, but in the traditional clothing, married ladies are very covered. So we have to understand that we were dealing with a culture which in many ways, as a traditional culture, had links with something that looks more like a Vedic culture. Yeah. So the people of South Africa, or the African people, many of them are very, very religious also. The Christian churches are full with, and you have these, you have a kind of Christian people. They wear a cross or a star, you know, they wear a star, and have this. The men have this cap with a star on it, and they're totally dedicated, right? They're very, very nice religious people, many of them. So, you know, there are actually many, many people that are naturally pious.
Amazing.
Many. Then, you know, South Africa is also a country, well, it used to be an apartheid, a good facility for 5 million whites, less facility for 2 million Indians, or 2.5 million Indians, and very poor facility for the Africans. Very, very poor, right? So naturally, a lot of the African people under that regime started to branch out into crime. They didn't have much alternative. If nobody provides, then you're going to take it. And if there's a racial division, well, people will naturally resort to some violence. Maybe it's not crime, maybe it's revenge, what you want to call it. So that element is also there in that country, so we have to be a little careful in South Africa. We have, therefore, nice walls around the property with electric fences, and we have good gates at the front that lock very well. Metal, we have good alarm systems in the houses and good bars in front of the window. But in India we also have such things. Maybe not the electric fans, but there are also walls and bars and gates. So
do you see the African people actually are also interested in Krishna consciousness?
Many. I mean, it's like Russia. You know, you may have heard about the glasnost in Russia, that after communism stopped, that the Russian people were so interested. South Africa's like that. The African people are totally interested, you know. It's like Atish is now traveling with me. He just came to South Africa. As we were leaving the country, he was going to the immigration booth, right, for going out of the country, get his passport stamped. So, you know, a few ladies in police uniforms and so on stamping passports. And he started preaching, and they all grouped together in his booth. He had 3 of them hanging at his lips while he's preaching to leave the country. That wouldn't happen in Australia, I can tell you that, you know.
Not often.
They're not like that. You know, you go do a university program with African students, and you get 40 questions, and they follow you to the car with more questions. I mean, it's like red hot. it's not just hot, it's red hot. People are so eager. Everyone is so interested. So interested.
So there's a surge for Krishna consciousness then.
Really for just the ability to be free and to choose your own spiritual life. It's amazing how good it is. They are ready, we are not ready.
Oh, interesting.
That's the problem. If only we were more ready, we could make so many more devotees. It's a challenge. And it's very easy to attract people. The next problem comes when we have to look after people.
Right.
Yeah. Just like here, here we are a largely congregationally based movement. We have lots of people, they all live at home and practice Krishna consciousness at home, and you all have nice tilak, and we assume you have an altar at home and are offering everything, and that you are nicely practicing Krishna consciousness at home. In South Africa, it's also a largely congregationally based movement. But that's not ideal for the African population, because their culture is very different, and it's not supportive, and often backgrounds in, when they were kept in poverty by the government, then naturally their areas also no education, so it became a little bit low class.
Right.
Once people were all put together in the cities, then the village culture got lost, and then what did you get? Not such a... Then you got low city life, naturally. So they need facility. So we have to create places where they can stay, and yet we don't want to create all separate centers, like an Indian temple, an African temple, a white temple. We want also integration. But integration, it's necessary in South Africa, integration. But integration is not easy when there are such cultural differences. You see it here in Australia. You have a largely Indian congregation, and how to integrate with the Australians, mate. It's a different flavor. Sometimes it goes well. Just like in India, when I was in charge in Vrindavan, I invited some Australian devotees to open the temple in Jaipur. Now Jaipur is a very cultural place, so everyone in Jaipur is coming to the mandir. And then we got these Australian devotees, and they go like, "Hey mate," bang, slap them on the back. "How you going?" And actually, these people from Jaipur, they like it. It's a welcome change, something informal. But obviously, in a country where you deal with different cultures, which have been quite separated, and we try to integrate it all in the temple, that can sometimes create misunderstandings and tensions and complications. And we'll need to create ashram facility for African devotees. So right now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create small preaching centers. So I've opened up a few small preaching centers which are low budget, and I give them a chance to do something. We have a few of them. I'm supporting these centers. Then I'm organizing Ratha Yatras in Soweto, which is a black area attached to Johannesburg with 2 million people. It's like the biggest ghetto in South Africa. And the world is looking at Soweto. The final of the World Cup was there. So there's a lot of attention going. Many tourists are going there. Mandela's house is there. Right. Many Americans are coming there to take pictures in Mandela's house. So we're doing something in Soweto. There's a temple there. Well, I also invest in individuals. I take devotees and I send them to India or to Radhadesh or other places where they can spend some time and be trained, and then they can come back and start leading some preaching activity.
That's pretty amazing. Maharaj, you also are involved in Europe. You preach in many countries throughout Europe. And I wanted to ask you some questions which are more internationally pertinent at this point of time. especially in your hometown of Amsterdam, there's now various laws permitting euthanasia. And the reason why I bring that up is because at the present stage, that's also a topic here in Australia, for Australia to start adopting some of these laws similar to the ones that are in Amsterdam and in the Netherlands. I'd like you to comment on that from a Krishna conscious point of view as far as euthanasia is concerned.
Well, I think you're all familiar what euthanasia is. It's basically where a person who is dying requests to be relieved from suffering and is through a medical help basically given some drugs by which they can voluntarily leave this world. We would not, from a Krishna conscious point of view, we can't support such activity. Although we can understand that there are some arguments, you know, if somebody is terminally ill and just having so much pain, saying like, you know, please, you know, just give me a shot and let it be over. I'm going to die anyway. We understand that kind of a mentality. So we're not insensitive to euthanasia or to the idea that people... But we can't condone it because man cannot take that right in his own hand. We decide that I'll end my life. We have to leave it up to the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord will decide, you know, when is our time of death and so on. However, the Vedic literature does offer a way out. Because the Vedic literature says that if one is indeed terminally ill or in his dying stage, that then, and one is so suffering so much, then it is permitted to fast till death. That is permitted. But one cannot take any drug or any poison or anything like that, but one is permitted to fast till death. In such a case, not an ordinary person, but a person who's really like on his deathbed, a long drawn out deathbed or so, may fast till death. That is permitted, and that is the only way that it can be done. But what we are seeing in the hospitals, they're intravenously feeding people and keeping them alive in that way. They keep them on a life support machine and so on, and all that is also not required.
That's right.
You know, I mean, the West has so many ways to prolong life. So Vedic culture is offering a way out, but definitely no poison or anything like that.
Another controversial thing that's happening in Europe, to a lesser extent here in Australia, is the growth of the Islamic faith throughout Europe. It's causing controversy. Do you see that as a good thing? And what are your views in regards to why the Islamic faith is gaining such popularity throughout the world?
I think that in this modern time of the global village where cultures are mixing and so on, it's inevitable that such developments take place. Europe has brought in many people from Islamic background as cheap labor, you see, for their factories. So they're reaping the results of their own activities. Countries like France also in the past maintained many colonies of an Islamic background, such as Morocco, Algeria, and so on. So France is loaded with Islamic people. Spain is, of course, on the border with Morocco.
Right.
And Spain has in the past been invaded by Islam.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't Islamic, but there was Islamic influence in Spain. There was invasions, Islamic invasion. They held territory. Mm-hmm. It was not that Spain was not Islamic, but they had Islamic influence. So it's not that Europe has no Islamic history. Also Yugoslavia, through Turkey, had traditionally Islamic influences and settlements, and up to the day of today, that's still existing. So in Central and Northern Europe, okay, they brought in a lot of people, and yeah, with it also maybe a more fanatic element also came in, you know, as every tradition has its more moderate side and its more rigid side. So the more rigid side of Islam can be confrontational with other beliefs and opinions, as we know, and they can create tension, as it does everywhere in the world.
Right.
In India we know very well. I also know very well in India because I was involved in Makrana to buy marble, and it was very, very many Muslims there. And then one night there was a Hindu who was drunk, who in a bar, who said that this book of satanic verses was a really good book from Salman Rushdie. Wow. Then, you know, they went into the masjid, they took all the petrol, they came out and they burned down the whole mazar. Then, of course, the Hindus retaliated and it became a whole thing. So we have seen such things. The Babri Masjid, that means the birthplace of Ram.
Right, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All these things we have seen. So tension is natural.
But generally speaking,
a genuine religious movement that we should work. I see it as an interim religion, just like Christianity. It is religious activity which is not eternal.
that's interesting.
It is religious activity which can prepare the ground. Many aspects of what goes under the name of Hinduism are also not eternal.
That's right.
But Krishna consciousness is eternal. So it's not that we are in competition with Islam or that we are in competition with Christianity. We are on another level. And therefore, it doesn't matter. You know, in the world we see Islam is gaining some following. We see Buddhism has gained following under the auspices of the Dalai Lama, but all this kind of following is only skin deep. Skin deep. So we are not concerned about it. It's more external, skin deep. It doesn't go deep into the heart like Krishna consciousness. It's all skin deep.
In a different direction, I'd like to take it a little different direction. We see that in the world in general is more accommodating to same-sex relationships.
He's asking all the great topics first: a murder attempt, euthanasia. You gotta
see an acceptance of this also within ISKCON in due course of time.
Well, same-sex relationships in ISKCON. It is a fact that these things exist all over the world, right? In every country, in every time, this phenomena has come up, and we also have naturally people who have this kind of inclination, who are devotees by nature. So what to do about that? Yeah, we cannot just say that they are not devotees. They are. At the same time, though, Srila Prabhupada points out that it is a kind of entanglement in the bodily platform, an entanglement with lust, that is of a stronger nature than the lust that is expressed between a man and a woman. It may seem very similar, but the relationship between man and woman is designed in such a way that the lust transforms into sacrifice, namely children. And once you have those, suddenly, everything changes. And that mechanism is Krishna's arrangement. And that is a scripturally sanctioned arrangement, a marriage between a man and a woman. Whereas we don't find any scripturally sanctioned arrangement for same-sex marriages. Therefore, we cannot just go around and just bless it all and say, yes, live happy together. I understand the predicament that people who are from that background have. They say, but you're accepting people that are of opposite sex, and they can live like, a monogamous relationship.
That's right.
But you don't allow that for same-sex people. So you give us the only option is to go for a renounced lifestyle, and we're not ready for it. We also need the time to prepare. Only advanced people can do that. So you don't really give us a realistic path in Krishna consciousness. So you should give us space to just have the same rights as everyone else. I understand that reasoning, and I can appreciate it from a social perspective, but I can not support that from a Shastric perspective, nor from Srila Prabhupada's perspective, who spoke out against it, right? And who basically told devotees to not pursue this kind of inclination.
And yet he knew some devotees had that inclination.
Yeah, and then, but what happens if devotees anyway have that inclination? Well, I think it may be hard if they want to actively express that kind of relationship to take initiation coming down in the line of Srila Prabhupada, because we can't, we're not authorized to do that. But at the same time, I think we're also not going to chase them away from, I think we can allow them to be members of the community, be devotees, and so on. I think what to do. Yeah. And of course the modern world is now beginning to sodomize, is that the word, or authorize such kind of relationships formally, legally, and so on. So that puts ISKCON more and more at odds with social trends, and it can create tension. And sometimes I've been caught, in dealings with such people, in such tensions. I have no intention to create trouble for them, you know what I mean? But I cannot change what Srila Prabhupada gave. I have to be, otherwise I'm no longer a bona fide spiritual master. So I cannot say that it is helpful for spiritual life. But anyway, even if one cannot avoid such a relationship, one can still do service for Krishna.
Absolutely. Yeah. My final question, Maharaj, is in Australia...
Well, thanks for all the fun questions.
Well, these are questions that devotees don't necessarily hear during a Bhagavatam class, and that's why I thought it's pertinent that we bring it up. The last one...
Well, the other day you were bringing up all kinds of questions about the class.
The last one that I wanted to bring up is that they recently did a survey in Australia that 70% of the population actually believes in God. And yet, we see so much ignorance, so much sinful activity going on. Why is that?
Well, Prabhupada said that there are two religions that are the religions of the Yavanas, the meat eaters. Yeah. So, that is Islam and Christianity. So we are not surprised. Once you start meat eating, then one loses all compassion. Yeah. And then, of course, sinful activities hard-heartedness will be the result. So why is it so surprising that they believe in God when they are meat eaters?
Some sentiment that they believe in God.
That's nice. No, it may be there, but it is at the same time there is a low level of personal development in terms of the modes of material nature. So it's religion with plenty of influence of tamagun, of ignorance.
Right. I'd like to thank Maharaj for the questions, for answering the questions so nicely. I'm going to throw it open to 2 or 3 questions from the audience.
What is the difference between a Siksha Guru and Diksha Guru?
Mm-hmm.
Because we, as a new devotees, we see so many inspiring Maharajas to come, so we feel like taking shelter of everyone. So, so it's very hard to choose because we are not in a very higher platform to choose the Maharaj.
Yeah, you should let them ask the questions, yeah?
We can keep on going, Maharaj, if you like.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm not fanatic about time. Well, one should not be so quick about Diksha. In the beginning, we take Siksha. And as you described, we should just take Siksha from various Vaishnavas, exalted Vaishnavas, experienced Vaishnavas who can give us many relevant, inspiring instructions, and we take and we learn from them. And that's fine. And Diksha is really not the order of the day. What happens is that we do need to go further, though. In due course of time, we need to develop a deeper relationship, not just a casual one of instruction, but also that we begin to make commitments to the instructions. Yeah, see, it's really lots of fun that there's someone who gives far out instructions, but we still sit there thinking, well, this one I like, this instruction, that one I didn't like so much, so that one I don't take. So I take only the instructions I like. Yeah. That is the beginning. So the next stage is where we start to make a commitment. And when we say, okay, I'm going to commit to the instructions of one particular spiritual master and promise to follow what he says. So then we have another good look at all the Siksha gurus and say, like, well, which one do I want to commit to? And then we begin to realize, yeah, well, what does it take to make such a commitment? It takes that there must be some trust. It's somebody can give a great class, but you don't know how they will instruct you outside of the class. The class may be absolutely fabulous, and then you ask, what should I do with my life? And then the next thing you get an instruction, move to China and preach. And I think, like, China, I don't want to go to China. Right? But it says one must follow the order of the spiritual master. So therefore, one must test the waters. One must see that, well, there are so many inspiring Siksha gurus, absolutely. But still there's a few whose nature and whose way sort of appeals to me. Or I have some confidence in them. I have some trust in them, in their, Then one may ask them some questions, either in writing or one may speak to them more personally, and ask them some advice about life, about your life. Don't ask them just questions anymore about general questions. Now just ask, well, this and this is the situation in my life. What do you think? What would be your advice, how I should progress? But because it's still Siksha, you're not bound. So you can test, you can see if it works. And if it starts to fit, if you feel, yes, I'm inspired by this person, I see that the practical instructions that this person gives are something I can deal with. Maybe China is more than we can deal with. It may be spiritually all right, but it may be too much. So if we feel the spiritual master is instructing in a way that I can relate to, then the relationship may be comfortable. Then at one point we can make this commitment and start aspiring to become a Diksha disciple. So it's said, because sooner or later it will get a little more personal with some Siksha gurus than with others. So they become the candidates for consideration. And maybe you have 2 or 3. Test them, test 2 or 3.
But we are not in a stage to test them, isn't it? Because Maharajas are all on a higher platform than what we are.
No, you can test. You can maybe not test everything. You cannot test how advanced they really are. That you cannot test. But for that you ask, there's another mechanism. I'll get to that in a moment. But what you can test is how the relationship works on a practical level. That you can test. And that's important to test. Now, as far as us being sure that this person is really spiritually advanced, when we have some interest in a particular spiritual master, then we ask blessings from the senior devotees. And the senior devotees can look on a deeper level. So when they start to give blessings, that is the protection that we have for the qualification of the spiritual master, the blessings of the senior devotees. So in this way, I'm offering you a good package. I'm offering you the approach from listen to the general preaching, see if it is inspired, take some personal advice, see if you can if you have the ability to surrender to this trend of directions, take the blessings of senior devotees, see what they feel about the relationship. If all that is lined up, then you can go forward. Then it's quite safe.
Yes.
Maharaj, I'm wondering about your early years. You mentioned that...
In Krishna consciousness or before?
Actually, just before you mentioned that you were going over to... Well, before you told your father that you were going over to India, you said. And I'm wondering, you said you were expected to take over the family business, and that your father was, I suppose, a very stressed and depressed person at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, obviously you must have had some kind of a spiritual insight then. You must have, I guess, vaguely felt how things work, if you want to put it that way. I'm wondering, how did you, I suppose, stay in your own head in that time and I suppose eventually escape that expectation?
Sure.
And I suppose knowing what you know now, would you have done anything differently?
Yeah. I guess I was sort of having a nice sheltered childhood till I was about 12, and then my father had a crisis, and he was overworked. He was totally overworked and totally stressed out, and at one point he was in a bad state. What happened was the doctor then prescribed a sleeping cure, and that was fashionable in those days, and he was going to give him enough drugs to knock him out for 17 days. Don't ask me why 17 days, but that was the principle. Let him sleep for 17 days. That was the therapy they had thought of. Now, what happened was that they gave my father enough drugs for 17 days, and he slept only 2 hours. So then they found out that for a long time he had been taking all kinds of pills, namely amphetamines and sleeping pills and so on. So it wasn't getting so nice, right? He had been working on these things. So that was part of the stress, yeah. And then they gave him, the doctor came back and he just gave him more drugs. But he still didn't really sleep. And he was lying in bed, half intoxicated, sometimes sleeping, sometimes awake. And then he said to me, "I am finished." And I looked at him and I thought, you are right. I thought, he just had a clear moment, you know. And then I thought, he's finished. So from that time on, I sort of consciously distantiated myself from my father. That was like a very shocking moment, and I just decided, okay, I'm going to take charge of my life. I'm going to start, I really made a break, an internal break with my father, which only physically was made then formally 4 years later. But in those years, I kind of started to think deeply about what is the goal of life and what am I going to do. And by the time I was 15, I was convinced that the goal of life was to be self-realized. I was then searching out by reading many, many books from many different backgrounds and traditions about spiritual, so-called spiritual life. So I was seeking. I was a seeker. And I was into music all along. That stayed with me, and it's even with me now. So I expressed that spiritual seeking also in my music. I started writing songs when I was 15. Started writing lots of songs. And all these songs were about seeking for spiritual life. I'm nothing but a stranger, always around. I'm nothing but a seeker for what I've never found. See, that's or another sort. Old hungry eyes have told me many lies, but maybe this one time I will be satisfied. Huh? So like that, I was already on a spiritual path, and by the time I became 17, I was old enough to really start to give it more shape.
Yes, Prabhu.
Given the stage you've reached in life, I just want you to share with us how you spend your everyday life.
In my service, you have to be very flexible. And I have my own standards for when I'm alone. I have different standards when I'm engaged in public preaching. When you leave me alone for a longer period of time, then I get up at 1:30 in the morning, and then I chant in the night, and later I study and write, and then I go to bed early at night. Now I'm going to very soon do that. After Australia, I'm going to India, to the Holy Dham, and I'm going to do exactly that, and I'm looking forward to it. At the moment, life is hectic. We are on a world tour. I do so many lectures and programs, many late nights, early mornings. As a sannyasi, you're supposed to be inspiring in the early morning and also inspiring in late night. What does that do for your rest? I don't know, but it looks a little awkward. So when I do these world tours, I'm on a different program now. Now the program is aimed at getting enough rest, getting enough sadhana, getting enough reading, and getting then plenty of opportunity to preach and glorify Krishna and relate to many people. So I have to balance myself between giving myself to people and at times taking energy, spiritual and also material. This kind of thing I'm doing right now, a weekend where I give 10 lectures. I mean, I've just given 10, this is number 10, right? In 2 days. That's a lot of lectures, and quite a lot. Right? So naturally it's a little stressful. There was someone who, our Mewar insisted on doing some acupoint massage, and he said, there was too much stress in the foot. Very painful kind of massage, they say. So this is a stress period, in a sense, materially speaking. I cannot do this too long, but for a while longer. Then, so when we preach, there is a taste, undoubtedly, but at the same time, it is the period of sacrifice. And then there's the other time, which is some time for myself, where recharging. So in this way, I try to keep a balance in my life between these two. So sannyas life is not so much a life for ourselves. It's a life for others. I don't live my own life. I think if I lived my own life, it would be really different than what I live now. It would be maybe more introspective, maybe more relating to my previous time. You can imagine, as I was writing songs, I took time for writing and thinking. You don't just write a song like that. So I'd like in the coming years, I imagine myself traveling less, doing less public programs, but more writing. Since I'm getting older, and it makes sense. So the next phase of my life will probably go in that direction. I'll still come to Australia, but I'll be a little more conservative with my time, and I won't give you as much time as you're getting now. But I'll try and make it quality time. And well, we'll take it from there, and I hope to relate to people through books, which I think could be on a deeper level. So I've traveled like this now for almost 15 years, and which is a long time in a way. And I guess in the next few years, I'll start shifting towards more writing and going more regularly on retreats for myself to sustain my health and at old age go a little slower pace and things like that.
So we're going to end the program now and let Maharaj recharge. Thank you very much.
So early.
Thank you very much, Kadamba Kanana Maharaj. His Holiness Kadamba Kanana Maharaj achieved. Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Bhakta. Yeah.